Yeah. And that kind of begs the question to really get curious with yourself when you are thinking, okay, well, I'm being self-compassionate. What does it really mean to be self-compassionate? What
Mm,
does it really mean to be nice to yourself? Sometimes it might mean, okay, yeah, today you're sick. You really shouldn't do 10,000
right.
steps today.
Yeah.
Other days it means, yeah, honey, I know you're really tired and this is going to be so good for you. And
Totally.
sometimes that's the more self-compassionate thing. So really saying, okay, am I actually doing myself a service or a disservice
Right.
with my form of self-compassion,
Right.
right? And am I helping or
Mm,
enabling myself? I talk a lot on this podcast about am I helping or enabling with other people?
yeah.
But ask yourself that question when it comes to the excuses that you're making for yourself around your resolutions.
Yeah.
Is it really nice to yourself, and is it really self-compassionate
Yeah.
to let yourself off the hook today? It may or it may not be, but get
Mhm.
honest with yourself about, am I helping or enabling? Because your brain
Mhm.
is going to want to say, oh yeah, of course it's easy. We want to hit the easy button and say, yeah, it's easier to just not do this thing.
Right.
But to love yourself enough to say, yeah, I know you don't really want to, and you're going to feel so much better after you do.
Totally. Totally. And I've had that pattern for sure where I'm like sick on the couch and I'm like, no, I should go. I should go for a run today. And I'm like, why are you doing that? Why do you feel like
Mm-hmm.
you should? Again, it's like checking in with your why. It's like, do I want to because I know that it's going to make me feel better? Or do I want to because there's some kind of pressure in the back of my head being like, if you don't do this, then you're going to be fat and lazy, or then you're never going to do it and you're never going to accomplish it. Like, is there, I always think of it as just like the most annoying person you can think of in the back of your mind being like, is there someone nagging at you being like, you have to, you have to. And if you don't, you're never going to amount to anything. Like that
Yeah.
harsh inner critic, if you struggle with a harsh inner critic, I think that's the kind of sneaky thought that comes in and tells you, you have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what you're saying about really checking in and being like, hold on, is this serving me? Is this serving me in this moment? And can I wait 2 more days until I feel better and then I can get back on track? Right? Like, why would you want to operate from this place of just not feeling good, right? Like I keep going back to pressure. I think that's so relevant in this whole conversation of kids don't want to be under pressure. Your inner child doesn't want to
Mm-hmm.
feel backed into a corner. That brings up more fear. That brings up more
Yeah.
intensity and more, pullback.
Yeah.
And this is about openness. This is about, um, following your truth and honoring yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to speak more about that pressure and how to shift that pressure to permission. But first, I want to kind of explore like, what are some of the emotions of the inner child? And how
Mm.
can those emotions help us to shift from that pressure to permission? So,
Yeah.
first, let's just kind of hear some. What are some emotions
Yeah.
that come from that inner child?
It's a few that we mentioned. Of course, curiosity, right?
Hmm.
Curiosity. I cannot say enough things about curiosity and how important it is to have it in your life, in your relationships, in your relationship to yourself. And curiosity sounds a lot like that. I wonder if I would like that, right?
Hmm.
That's kind of how to integrate it. I wonder if that would be
Yeah.
fun. I wonder if, you know, if I would like class pass. I wonder if I would like going to yoga. I wonder if I would enjoy meet friends at pickleball. Like that sort
Yeah.
of um, rooting down in possibility, I think is a huge thing. Delight. And I think as adults we really really lose delight,
Hmm.
and tapping into that energy, and delight to me is just about I'm doing it because I want to, period.
Hmm.
And how often do we do that as adults, right? Where we say, I'm just going to do it because I feel like it. I don't
Yeah.
think for most of us, it's a lot, right?
Yeah.
I live in Santa Monica and I so often go past the pier. And there have been so many times where I walk past the pier and I'm like, I should just go on the roller coaster. Just on a random Tuesday at 4 o'clock, when I'm going for my afternoon walk. I'm like, it'll take 15 minutes. And my friends are always like, why do you want to do that? I'm like, I don't know, because it's fun and it's silly and it like delights
And
me.
why not?
And why not? Exactly. And why not? And I think that's the
Yeah.
energy. Why not? Why don't you? Why don't you go jump in the
Mhm.
ocean? why don't you go outside and make a snowman, or like whatever it
Yeah.
is, depending on where you are in in the planet and in the US. But, you know, why not is such a
Yeah.
good question to ask your inner child. Oh, because,
Yeah.
and then we go like, then the adult self comes back up, right? Oh, that's so silly. What's the point? There's not enough time. We shouldn't do that. If there's other stuff to do, there's always going to be other stuff to do, right?
Yeah.
There's never going to be enough time. But it's like, I don't know, check in with yourself. Does the taking 15 minutes out of your day to go ride a roller coaster and scream your head off, to me, that gives me a lot. That brings like a lot of
Yeah.
value to my life. Um,
Yeah.
you know, I just think it's really worth exploring that delight. Um, I mentioned curiosity. I mentioned delight. I think, you know, I ex- there's a lot about expression that I think comes to the surface when I
Mhm.
think of the inner child. Like, do you really feel expressive? The way you were talking about decorating, that is such
Uh-huh.
a way to, like, when you think, oh, I'm going to put this up here because it represents me, or I'm going to wear this necklace because it represents this story and this connection. It's like you're being expressive in that moment. Um, and I think that's just so unbelievably important as you move through. Okay, are there any that you think of, like any emotions that you can tune into that you think of?
Yeah. Well, I've been thinking as you've been talking, and I've also been making a list of the ones that you've been saying. So here's my mini list is curiosity, playful, delight, joy, excitement, wonder, awe, spontaneity. You kind of spoke with that about the roller coaster,
Yeah.
and expressive. And I will be honest with you, Kellen, after you and I kind of explored the idea of doing this episode, I felt so inspired. And I even
Mm.
told my kids, I'm like, all right, one of my resolutions now is to make our house more fun.
Mm.
And let's just explore what that might look like. Like maybe we want to do a once a month craft night with girlfriends, or maybe we want to, like what's it going to be like? What are we going to do? But maybe consider making that one of your goals is to I'm going to do something spontaneous, right? It's kind of hard to like plan spontaneity, but to
Yeah.
notice when you experience the emotions. Like what came to mind was I remember one day I was shopping with my kids and we're leaving the store and everybody's huddled up right by the cart corral inside because it's just a downpour outside. No one's leaving the
Mm.
store because nobody wants to be in the downpour. And I'm like, you guys wanna? And
Let's
they're
do
like,
it.
no.
Let's
And
do
I'm
it.
okay, I'll pick you up. So I like booked it with my cart, ran through the parking lot, went and got the car and came and picked him up. But it was me and one other dude running through the parking lot, jumping through the puddles, just enjoying the rain. And it's such a little thing, but being willing to step out of the norm and be like, you know what, it does sound kind of fun to just run through a puddle. I haven't done that in so long. And I'm just going to let myself jump in a puddle as I go and
Totally.
get, but waiting and seeking those opportunities and again that bravery, I'm going to add bravery to it because I think
Bravery is
little kids
such
are
a good
brave.
one. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a really, really important one. That's so
Yeah, because
important
these
because,
kids call it bravery or call it that you don't care, but they do the thing.
right. Right, right. They it's not without fear, right? That we move through difficult things. And I think
Mhm.
when we think about the inner child, it can be just like, it's not just about, and I think silliness might also be one, depending on,
Yeah.
who you are. But I don't think, I think the reality is that there are things that are scary. This isn't about like pulling out tough emotions,
Yeah.
It's about honoring the tough emotions. It's like, again, I'm going to use the example of like, I'm going to hold your hand as you move through fear, right? I'm going
Yeah.
to support you when you're like, I'm afraid to jump off this cliff into this watering hole. Like, you're like, yeah, it's okay. I'm here and I'm going to I'm going to help you feel safe, let you know that I'm watching from the rocks, and I'm going to support you. And I think that's just it's just really relevant to consider.
Well, and I love that you said the word holding
Mm.
because I think we have grown a lot as a society at holding space for the negative emotions and giving ourselves permission
Yep.
to experience the negative.
Yep.
And we think because we are wearing a mask and pretending everything is okay, that we're holding space for joy, but I don't think we are. I think
Mm.
that we're really good at holding space for the negative, or at least getting better.
Yeah.
But what would it look like if we intentionally held space for joy, for spontaneity, for bravery? If we intentionally thought, you know what, today I'm just going to sit with that joyful emotion and allow space for it
Yeah.
and see what happens.
Yeah.
And that again creates that curiosity, right? Like what would it be like to fully embody joy?
Yeah.
What would
Oh,
it look
I love
like?
that.
Maybe it's not as scary as we think.
Yeah. Yeah. I I think what I just tuned into also is the creating space, right?
Mm,
To allow yourself this to be in this energy, you have to create space, right? And
yeah.
again, this goes back to like being an adult and we have a to-do list and I have to do this and I have to do that. And I can't tell you how many times I've made a to-do list. I wrote down all this stuff and I was like, I actually don't have to do any of that. That's
Mhm.
really not the most important thing for my life today. What's really
Yeah.
important is that I make sure that I'm feeling good and that I make sure I'm moving my body and that I'm nourished and that I'm cared for and that I'm attuned to myself, right? Organizing my mail drawer is like not a priority. I should just probably throw all that stuff away. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we sometimes I see this a lot in um older adults that they're just like creating projects for themselves, like creating work. And I'm always like, do you really need to
Mm,
do that? I can appreciate, you know, taking care of things and you know, doing the things that we have to adulting, right? Doing the adulting things. But at some level, there is work that we create for ourselves that it's like, you don't have to do
yes.
that. You know what? It would just be so much better to
Yes.
go outside and run in the rainstorm or dance in the rainstorm.
Yes, and that speaks to me so loudly right now because the home we
Mm,
moved into, and I know I've talked about it here, was the
yeah.
home of a OCD hoarder.
Yeah.
And that's all I could see looking around the house was all of the unnecessary work and how
Mm,
much it did really rob her of her joy. You know, it kind of zapped her. And and I think that a lot of those things give us a sense of control.
yeah.
And sometimes we mistake everything being in our control. We mistake that for
Mhm.
something that brings us joy.
Totally.
But is it really?
Yeah. Yeah. And sitting in that space. And I mean, what was that experience for you as you're like looking around the house, like, oh my God, I should take care of this and we should do that. And
Yeah. Complete overwhelm. I mean,
totally.
I could see how I mean, this is just side notes, probably all
Mhm.
too personal stuff, but yeah,
Mhm.
I could see why this family member experienced so much anxiety.
Mhm.
I mean, and it was and yes, she had a lot of mental health issues, but it was
Sure.
interesting to see how she knew if we came to help her out with something and set something down, she'd know if it was a quarter inch off.
Mm.
But all of her energy was invested into controlling the
Yeah.
situation versus just being present,
Yeah.
just enjoying life and so yeah, so that's really interesting to just think on the idea that I think that our adult mind thinks we must control the situation, but
Mm.
that kind of is in opposition to that childlike joy of
Yeah.
having a little bit of chaos and playfulness and
Totally.
spontaneity and fun.
Yeah.
Fun is kind of messy, glitter gets everywhere.
Mhm.
To embrace that part that it's
Yeah.
okay, and like you said, making space for it, knowing that this is a part of it.
Yeah. I'm gonna add two more emotions to the list, but based on what you just said, which is present and unburdened. I think when you
Mm,
think about a child, think about how present they are. They're like, you're like, okay, we have 15 minutes and then we gotta go home. And they're like, I'm in. I'm not thinking of the clock. I'm tuned into this caterpillar
it's
on
so
this
true.
on this rock. They're just like there and in the moment and they are present and
Yeah,
they're not thinking about, oh God, tomorrow's Monday and what do I have to do for work? And then I got to do laundry. And
mm,
like, they are not creating to-do lists in their mind, right? They're
yeah,
exploring. They're like, sure, they're going to be thinking of like, oh, when can I play a video game or whatever? But there's,
yeah.
you know, and then the unburdened part, right? Think about how many burdens, even if anyone listening just could take a minute right now to be like, how many things just feel like such a burden in your life?
Okay,
Kids.
can you speak more to that? Because so
Yeah.
many people pleasers listen to this
Ooh,
podcast,
yes. Yeah.
and they opt into not only
Mhm.
their own burdens, but everybody else's. So can you speak a little bit more to that about how do
Mhm.
you unburden yourself and how does that oppose
Yeah.
your childlike energy?
You know, I think it goes back to exactly what we said, which is like checking in with yourself. Do I like the reason that I'm doing this? You
Mhm.
know, in the sense of like oh, she asked me to do this thing. She wants me to run a 4K with her, 5K with her, 4K. I'm obviously not a runner. Um,
Some of us, that's all we want to do,
some
or
of us,
less.
I do not want to run. But see, like my inner child does not want to run. um, but that's so funny. Someone's like, oh, I really want you to do this with me. And people get into the trap of like, oh, well, I want to make them feel good, right? I don't
Yeah.
want them to have to do it alone. And then you're thinking so much into another person's experience. And I think to me, that's the key, right? You're thinking, well, if I don't do it with them, then they're not going to do it. And I want them to fulfill what, what their desires are. So
Mhm.
you're showing up and helping them to do that, which, you've talked on your podcast before. It is a beautiful, loving thing to do, but at what cost? Like,
Yeah.
at what cost are you like, this is a burden. I can't do this anymore, right? Um,
Hmm.
where is it sort of pulling from my life? And where am I kind of giving more than I'm receiving, or where am I creating resentment, right? The resentment's huge in this.
Yeah.
And and just to be, I think at the root of it all, it's just like you can't take life so seriously. And
Yeah.
I am always in the trap of like, oh, this feels really serious and this feels really heavy. And
Hmm.
I just think of a kid being like, so what? Who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. So when we started exploring the idea of this episode, you said something that I thought sounded like a lot of fun. And I think it would really just kind of tie up today's episode beautifully. But you talked about writing a love letter to your inner child.
Yeah.
Can you share more about that idea?
Yeah, I was inspired. I saw something on Instagram, and it just, as soon as I saw it, I was like, I need to do this. I need to write a love letter to my inner child. And you know, I I had a pretty difficult year, and I was really thinking about the changes that I wanted to make. And I've been doing a lot of deep inner child work, and I think in the
Mhm.
uprooting of all that, I'm like, we are not supposed to live this way. We are not supposed to live in pressure and frustration and disappointment and um, just working tirelessly. And I was like, it just feels so out of alignment with what we were sent on this planet to do, just to
Yeah.
exist and to support each other and to laugh and to sit in the sun and to do all these things. So writing a letter and committing your 2025, I was calling it the like a love make 2025 a love letter to your inner child. When I
Oh,
think
yeah.
about
Making
doing that,
2025 a love letter. That's
yeah,
right. I misheard
yeah,
it.
no,
Yes.
no,
Making
no, it's
2025 a love letter to yourself. Yes.
yeah, yeah. So much of it is about writing, is about the commitment part of it. Like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm committed to you. I am committed, and first and foremost, um, it's about being like, I love you unconditionally. You know,
Yeah.
I think that to me at the root of all of this is where the energy lies. I love you. I am totally in awe of you. I'm inspired by you. It's about reflecting back to yourself and saying like, so here's what this is going to look like. I'm dedicating this year to you, and making this year be a reflection of how much I truly do love you. And I heard something on a podcast the other day. Somebody said, love is not a feeling, it's a way of being. And to me, when I heard that, I was like, how would a person showing up in love act? They would act like, hey, I'm attuned to you. I'm making sure that you're nourished, and I'm making sure that you're processing through your emotions. And I'm making sure that you're finding little pieces in your day, in your year, in the mundane that are exciting and that light you up. I'm making sure you have things to look forward to. It's really being attuned to self and creating a
Mm.
life that you really want. So, I think as I did the practice, it was really about a lot of affirmation. I care about
Mhm.
you. I'm here for you. You are a bright, interesting person. You are capable. So a lot of of esteeming the self, and then say, and then tuning into the imagination of this year is going to be all about you. This is about
Mhm.
what your what makes you feel excited, what makes you feel curious. So I'm gonna you lead, I'm gonna follow, right? You want to go have a picnic in the park, you pick the park, I'll bring the supplies. You want to learn to play guitar, I'll get the guitar. Like, and again, I don't think it's about just like picking up a hobby and dropping a hobby, right? It's about attunement at the end of the day. It's about loving and cherishing and honoring and attunement. So um it was such a beautiful practice. Honestly, I could not recommend it more. I don't know if you've done it since we talked. It was only a few days ago, but it really was such a heart opening exercise to kind of check in and say, what is this going to look like? If I get to the end of 2025 and I look back at this letter and just say, hey, yeah, I did that. I did that for you. I took care of you, and um, I made sure you're my first priority, right? Your
Yeah.
well-being is my first priority. And I want to continue to encourage you to build the life that you want, right? When you think about kids, they are filled with
Mhm.
possibility, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it's like allowing yourself to stay in that energy of possibility and to stay in
Mhm.
the energy of learning and change and evolution in a way that's nurturing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that just that idea of making 2025 a love letter to yourself, it completely shifts the energy, right? It's so different that it's the difference between hating yourself thin and loving yourself healthy.
Totally.
And when you talked about just really reflecting back to yourself the love, no, this year is dedicated to you, and that love is not a feeling, it's a way of being. And how what so I'm just going to read some of the questions because I
Mhm.
thought that was so good. But thinking on love is not a feeling, it's a way of being. And this year being the year of love for yourself, how would a person show up and act through that love for self? And really asking yourself, how can I love, affirm, and nurture myself best this year?
Yeah.
It does do exactly what you talked about at the beginning. It starts with that softening, starting the year off soft, starting it off nurturing,
Yeah.
tapping into your feminine energy
Mm-hmm.
and nurturing and loving self
Mm.
so that you can have that safe space created by you to experience that joy, that playfulness. You have to
Yeah.
feel safe to feel playful, right?
Totally.
You
Yeah.
need to create that for yourself through that love and that nurturing. That's
Yeah.
yeah, I just love that
Yeah.
idea. That's just beautiful.
I know that we're wrapping up. I do have to just say, I love that you called out the feminine energy of it. I think when I wrote my letter, I really just I really couldn't put my finger on it. And it's exactly that. It's nurturing.
Mhm.
I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this feels very, there's a really deep feminine energy behind it. That's a caretaker, right? A deep attunement to what do you need? And I'm here for you. And, even in writing that, I kind of felt that turn on a little bit, in my internal world. And, um, there's a softness to that, and that's
Yeah.
really beautiful. Starting the year off soft is the motto.
Yeah.
So just moving towards
I
that.
love that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. And
Yeah.
yeah, is there anything else you want to share in closing?
And, it's always such a good conversation with you. I love this. I think the biggest thing to just close out with is just reminding people that it's okay to be a beginner. And
Mm.
I've said that in many instances, in a smaller sense, but when I zoom out, I'm like, we are beginners every single day. Every single day is a new beginning. How we respond and react to situations, how we look at our resolutions. Like, you are a first time human. And I think when we think about a child, we give them so much more grace. And I think if you can
Yeah.
just give yourself grace in this process of, um, going after your dream, it is about kind of going after creating a life that you're excited about, and creating a dream life.
Mhm.
And like you said, you can't get there by hating yourself. You just have to like love
Yeah.
yourself and nurture yourself and give yourself grace through it and let yourself begin and just be on the journey.
Yeah. I love that we're all first time humans. And yeah, and that it's bringing it back to that childlike energy. Yeah, kids are
Mhm.
all beginners. So to be willing to be a beginner is a childlike attribute.
It
Like, yeah,
is.
I'm going to try something new.
Yeah. Yeah. Really.
Yeah.
I have in the back of my mind an experience that I had this year where I was on the phone with my coach and I was so in
Mhm.
despair. I was like crying and I was just like having a hard time. And she sent me a voice memo and she had
Mhm.
just had a baby and the baby was in the background and I could hear him crying. And she's like, it's so funny. He's getting really frustrated because he can't lift his head up. Like the muscle's not strong enough. And it was just like such a mirrored experience. And I was like, oh, I was like, I'm doing that to myself, right? I'm getting
Wow.
frustrated with myself because I'm not further along. And I'm like, but I'm just strengthening a muscle. And then her and I laughed and I was like, you didn't know you had two babies. I'm like, I'm the
Yeah.
biggest
Oh,
baby
I love
there
that
is.
so much.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
it
and what
was,
a loving thought that I
yeah.
just haven't strengthened that muscle yet.
Yeah. Yeah, you're just learning. You're
Yeah.
just like, I've never done this before. So why was I putting so
Mhm.
much pressure on myself and being like, I basically the way I was looking at what I was trying to accomplish was like, you should be able to run by now. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I haven't even lifted my head yet.
Mm.
It's like you have to let yourself lift your head. You have to let yourself learn to walk. You have to let yourself wobble and fall and then get back up again. And
Mhm.
that's the process of all of this. And that's to me, that's what setting a resolution is, right?
Yeah.
Getting back up, getting back up and doing it again and
So
again.
good.
Yeah.
I love it. That is so beautiful. So, Kellen, tell people
Yeah.
where they can find you.
You can find me at daydreamercoaching.com. I'm also on Instagram at daydreamercoaching. And I've been on TikTok as well. And that name is actually Emotionally Kellen. So a little bit of a different name, but you can find me on there chatting about all this stuff also.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah.
being here.
Thank
And to everybody
you.
listening, we're talking about goals for the entire month of January. So make sure you're subscribed so you can get support around your goals. And yeah, do something spontaneous this week. Just have fun. Ride the roller coaster, jump in the puddle, go sledding, do something fun and spontaneous, and practice holding space for your joy. I think would be my final thought is
Mm,
yeah, just be a little bit more intentional about that playful childlike energy.
I love it. So good. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, everybody. I'll see you next week. Bye.